Okay, I think we're live, Nicole.
Awesome. Hey everyone, how are ya?
We're going to, I was going to just click, since this is our first time using Restream, I'm going to click over just quickly just to make sure it's showing up on LinkedIn. And it is. Okay,
All
great.
right, I love it, Danielle. Thank God you're much better with technology than I am.
Yeah, maybe better, not necessarily a tech genius over here, but I might be slightly better than you. Well,
Yes.
welcome, everybody. This is being recorded. So, even if you're not here live, we'll also share this out after. I am Danielle Posa, and welcome to our first conversation on the pursuit of purpose, which is a LinkedIn Live series dedicated to exploring the profound significance of purpose in our lives, but especially in our career. So I'm the founder of the Wellbeing Hacker, and joining me is the amazing Nicole Carline, who's also my second cousin, which I always feel the need to acknowledge and say. And she's the president of the Wellbeing Hacker and also the head coach of our Legacy Builder program, which is kind of tied to the whole theme of what we're going to talk about today. And together, we are here to spark a conversation about why feeling a deep sense of purpose is not just a luxury, but really a necessity for work and for life. So, in each session of this series, we're going to dive into why many people often feel stuck in the corporate grind and how we can break free of that to pursue work that not only pays the bills, but also fills the soul. So, whether you're contemplating a job change, a career shift, or you're just seeking more fulfillment in your current role, this is the conversation for you. So we encourage you to interact with us, ask questions, of course, share your stories, and just really use this as an opportunity to explore possibilities. And today we'll kind of take that first step together towards a more purposeful and impactful life.
Awesome. Thanks for opening that up, Danielle. And it's great to see everyone live. And this is a fun experiment that we're going through right now. Um, But, as Danielle said, I mean, this is a topic that we feel so passionate about, right? And for a long time, throughout my life, throughout my career, I think I had felt years of just frustration because I had taken a path that was just, what I think so many professionals do, Danielle, right? We just take this path of, leading our lives, going into our corporate job or our work and choosing a major in college. And we don't necessarily always think about what it is exactly that we really want to do. We have some ideas around it, but we don't really understand and know. And so sometimes I think it takes some time to really think about that pursuit, that journey that you need to do in order to get to know yourself even better, right? And so we're excited to have this discussion with you guys because, first and foremost, Danielle and I love having these opportunities to share with others what we feel is, purpose, not only in career, but also in your life. We're very intentional about our lives as well. And we're always looking to bring the best out of others, really get the best versions of themselves out of others. And so we want you to put in your questions and different comments that you have today. And we're also going to just talk about some experiences that we've had as well recently. So please do use the chat function here. We'll have a look at that as that's going live. But let's get started. So
Sounds good.
Danielle, tell us a little bit about, what that means from your perspective in pursuit of purpose.
Yes, well, I'm so glad you asked that, Nicole. So yes, we selected this title for a reason. It did stem from, I see someone just asked about the recent event we did with a group of students, but it did
Yeah.
stem from that. So I know I don't need to tell you this, Nicole, but our work is all about, people pursuing their purpose and specifically integrating that purpose with their job, because that has such a major, impact on your life. But we hear the phrase "in pursuit of happiness," right? And happiness is this term that's kind of overused in society because it also just gets a lots of buzz and good PR. It makes for good headlines to talk about, the happiest countries and, what does it take to be happier. But aiming for happiness is the wrong thing. And there's actually science that shows that when people, that sometimes aiming for happiness can create more unhappiness, because it starts to feel like when I'm not happy, something is wrong, or that I'm supposed to feel happy all the time. But the reality is that happiness is a fleeting emotion. It is not it's not a state that we can live in all of the time.
Right.
And and as you and I both know, right, some of our hardest experiences in our lives, losing family members, challenges that we all face in life, are
Mhm.
often the things that add the most color to our lives, that teach us the most, that where we learn the biggest lessons. So purpose is more in that domain, right? Like when you're pursuing purpose, when you're pursuing what's most meaningful to you in life,
Right.
or you're seeking some kind of difference that you want to make in the world, the whole journey towards that can be a very fulfilling one. The journey towards just happiness can often lead people astray, and to kind of and to not necessarily ever get like a sense of fulfillment. So that's kind of the whole philosophy behind pursuit of purpose. But anything you
Yeah.
want to add? Obviously, this isn't.
No, I think that's spot on. I mean, I think anytime you're pursuing something, it's the progress that you're making towards a destination or a goal.
Mhm.
That is the part where people have the most fun, right? That's where we learn the lessons. That's where we get excited about possibilities, about new things that are happening. I mean, this relates to so many things in our life. It could be around, if you're going for a career promotion, right? Or a certain title within a company. Sometimes it's that pursuit that really is the exciting part and how you get there,
Yeah.
right? And then once you're there, sometimes to your point, you either might really be happy with where you are, or that once you get to that destination, that's like that moment when all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm here. What's next? How do I pursue more? What do I do beyond this?
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's this.
there's a I know I've mentioned this to you before, but there's a book called The Happiness of Pursuit, because the whole idea of it is that it's not that human beings want to learn and grow, that it isn't just that, that end result of happiness, that's what we're after. So then when you look at when pursuit in and of itself is important, just like pursuing something, feeling like you're going after a goal, that's important as humans. Then if you're pursuing a purpose or
Yep.
something, then it's that the combination of that, feeling like you can actually love the pursuit and the destination, is basically what, the concept of pursuit of purpose is all about. But I feel like maybe that's a good segue to talk more about like your story, because I feel like you maybe had where you were kind of pursuing almost like happiness in a sense of climbing the corporate ladder, and you've had a very successful corporate career,
Right.
which maybe some of the people on this call know, but you were somebody who was, I would say, you were pretty happy. Like you've always been a happy person.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're always like doing so well and always impacting people and your customers, because you're somebody who's so like great with building relationships. but maybe didn't necessarily feel like you were in that purpose domain. So maybe can you
Yeah.
just share some of your story and kind of how you went from like corporate to, making some of that initial those
Yeah.
changes to then maybe where we are now?
Definitely. And I actually think it relates a lot to one of the questions, or more of a comment that just came in. It says, I think as we evolve as people, our purpose evolves. And I agree completely with this,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that, we all go through different experiences and times in our life, and we do have we evolve as people. And so the things that are meaningful and that we want to have, that purpose that we want to have, can be different over a period of time,
Yeah.
right? And that happens obviously, when you start a family and when you have kids, and there's purpose, that or a role of purpose that you play there. But to get back to your question and to kind of hone in on this a little bit more. So as Danielle said, there was, I started my career in sales, and I started it in corporate. I really followed the path of my father. He's my hero. He's an amazing man.
Uncle
And
Mario. Yeah.
it's Danielle's uncle. And so it's great because, I think many of us, really just kind of our parents or family members or people who have been mentors in our lives, they're kind of the ones at an early age that start to inspire us a bit, right? And we start to see how their lives evolve and what they're involved in, and that sparks the interest. And so that was certainly the way for me when I went through high school, and was looking at the lives of my mom and my dad. My mom was a teacher at the time, my father in business and corporate. I had a lot of similarities like my dad. I loved communication. I loved seeing him with his customers and, engaging with people and helping to solve problems. I was so intrigued by that. And so I went off to college and I majored in business and in sales. And actually, if there's any class in college that I truly remember, it was my sales class. It was the Challenger sales class that I took in my senior year.
Oh,
And
really?
my
Okay.
professor, yeah, my professor was incredible. He came from Xerox, and
Mhm.
he was selling, printers at Xerox, but he really came with that like Challenger methodology. And I was just so intrigued in that class. I loved it. And that's really what inspired me and said, okay, I'm going to go after this. Now, another event happened in my life shortly after college, and that's when I lost my mom to cancer. And that was a really challenging moment because, there's so many things that obviously, um, you have to kind of go through that like trauma and that experience. And the one thing that I found after graduating from college was like, wow, it stopped me in my moment and it said, life is short, you know, you really have to, there's no guarantees in life that you're going to live a long one, right? So you have to live it to its best. And the other part was like, I felt helpless in that situation, losing my mom at that time, right?
Mhm.
Like I felt like I wanted to do something more. I wanted losing her and not knowing much at that time about like healthcare and how maybe we could have, how the outcome could have been different. It
Mhm.
just was one of those things that was like, you know, how can I now be in a position to help more people?
Mhm.
Right. And that's actually what took me to getting involved in the medical device industry. So I started to put a focus and hone in on, at the time, pharmaceutical medical device, because I felt like, you know what, I can be in a position where I can leverage my communication skills, my ability to connect with customers, but actually like be in an industry where I know we're helping patients, right? And have some, I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor, right, at that moment in time, but it was like if I could at least have some impact there. And so I spent 12 years actually in the operating room, which was pretty crazy, right? At a young age, being trained in medical device sales in an operating room. And I really started to see and hear about the patients, how we impacted them. And then I made a decision in life to uproot. I was living in the Midwest. I wanted to come back to the East Coast. And I decided to make a different transition then. I had this great medical sales experience, but there was a CEO in the software tech industry that I had become very good friends with through a friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And he was building software and technology for Microsoft, actually, in the healthcare life sciences space. And so we had a great relationship. And he was like, we could really use your subject matter expertise to get into this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like at the time it was like, okay, let me try something different, something new, high tech, being back on the East Coast. And I did that. And so I took my subject matter expertise from the healthcare, the medical device industry, and now I started to work with software companies and how they could develop and implement software in
Mm-hmm.
this industry.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I also started our family. So there were just a lot of things that were happening. But it was kind of at that moment where I had probably less impact in some ways of the direct impact that I had with patient.
Right.
Now it was more about, okay, like software and clients and larger these volume deals. And while I think we were doing a lot of great work and helping customers, technology per se was not like where I felt the greatest passion for, right?
Right.
And so at that point, that's when I started to feel a bit more frustrated in my career, because it was like I knew I wanted to be able to make a bigger impact and I wanted to help more people. And I was exposed. I had a lot of opportunities to see many great speakers, right? Like oh God, Diane Sawyer, I had an opportunity to work with, and Barbara Cochran. And, and I loved like seeing all these amazing speakers, Sarah Blakely, they were all so inspiring to me. And I felt like, wow, like they're really making an impact on me as an individual, because they're up there, they're sharing their story, they're inspiring, and they're helping people grow and figure out how to develop personally. Tony Robbins, all of these people. And I loved it so much that I got to a point and I started to say, well, I want to make a bigger impact. I know I can do that with teams and I know I can do that with individuals, but I want to be able to do it at a much bigger scale.
Yeah.
And I wasn't feeling that so much in that like corporate. So I was
Well,
on
I
the
think I just
search.
want to like highlight something you said, because I
Yeah.
feel like that first because it's like you started off on a track that because of losing your mom, it sounds like you started to have a hint of like knowing that, hey, you wanted to start off somewhere where you were feeling that more of that impact, which is why you're
Definitely.
more in that direction of the healthcare space.
Hmm.
Then after that, as it happens in life, right, there's kind of these we kind of get pulled into a more default track by virtue of like just the opportunities that show up, just like
Spot on.
happened with. And then you said like you felt frustrated because it was like all of a sudden the tech wasn't what you. And it's like there's this, I know we're probably going to talk about it, we always end up on this topic of like alignment, right? When you can, like,
Hmm.
when there's something deep inside, that there's something that's out of alignment with who
Totally.
you really are and what you really want.
Yes.
That's where the like frustration comes from. And it's not like a basic frustration. It's like this internal, like,
Yes.
sense of like discord that something is off. But then there are these other forces that kind of mute that voice a little bit, right? Or like
Yep.
rationale that kicks in of like, well, I'm learning this is a great opportunity. But then so then so keep going. But I feel like that to me is like a little bit of almost like where it started in terms of
Yeah.
like it started to get off track maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. You're absolutely right, because what I started to realize, and again, this is talking about like evolving as people, right? You get married, you start a family. So now you are working and your mind's maybe not thinking as much about impact, right? All of a sudden now you're thinking about, okay, money, titles, right? Your social environments start to change. And so there was a time where all of a sudden, I started to say, okay, I appreciate great opportunities, and I appreciate, we all need to make a living. We all need to, have goals. And actually I'm a big proponent of having very big goals, right? But I think that there was a point where you just, I don't know what's the best word. It's like you get sucked into all of a sudden starting to chase money and titles.
Yeah.
And then you start to lose more of that identity of yourself, because now you're taking on different roles, responsibilities. I was getting into more of the management track. I loved it for helping the people on the team and growing and developing. That was my favorite part. But there were
Mhm.
a lot of parts of the job that were not, you know, natural to me and not part of my strengths. And that led to more of the frustration of
Yeah.
the
So
work.
at what point, just to like kind of just to fast forward a little bit, like of
Yeah.
like where did you, where did it start to come to, a point where you said, okay, I need to start to make a
Change.
change. Like I guess like what was the breaking
Yeah.
point for you
It
in
was it happened quite a bit right when I went, pretty much after I moved back to New Jersey and after making more of the transition from medical device to technology. I think that's when I started to feel like, is this really the place that I feel like, is this it? Is this really where I feel like I'm going to make the greatest impact? Is this really what I love and get excited and
Mhm.
out of bed for every single day?
Mhm.
And, I started to go down because, to your point, I felt out of alignment, right?
Mhm.
And I frustrated. I would talk to my family about it. It was like I felt lost.
Yeah.
And I reached out. I reached out to a lot of people in my network. I was trying to learn more about what different people were doing, what sounded exciting. And I did. I imagined like different versions of myself, different types of things, different types of work that I could potentially do that I'd be more excited about. And I started to explore that. I also, I ended up attending, which was awesome, a Tony Robbins event too, which I know you've done too, Danielle. And that was great. That really helped to at least think about what I really wanted more of in my life and what were some of those limiting beliefs that I had, that I needed to overcome. But what was challenging was I couldn't yet figure out the career, the clarity that I needed,
Mhm.
right? And that's when we came together. When my brother said, Nicole, like, you need to connect with Danielle. She's helping experienced professionals in figuring out the type of work that they're meant to do and how to start transitioning into that work. And you had such a structured process, framework to really start, so I could start to really unpeel like these layers of getting to know myself again. And I think that's the key. Like when we talk about pursuit, the pursuit of like starting to now, listen, we're all going to have stresses in our lives, and there's always going to be things that we're frustrated on. But the second you start to pursue something and put your focus and energy into something that you want to change, and you were teaching me like, hey, let's peel back the onion again to recognize more of who you are and get to know your passions, what your strengths are, what your talents are. How do you want to make an impact in the world? I mean, that was like mind blowing because I never went through that kind of evaluation and
Well, and
experience
that is
before.
like interesting, like just to hear you say, because, because just knowing that you're the type of person that is like into the self-development stuff, who's been to
Yeah,
Tony Robbins, you've read, like, I know you've geeked out on a lot of the same types of books I have, like
totally.
but I think that's the thing about like this work. And I think that's the part I want to add to the whole kind of pursuit thing, right? Is like it's interesting even now, even as much as I know you, like to hear you say how unique kind of like the process was in kind of
Yeah.
figuring like your purpose out. Because I think that that's that's to me why the pursuit of purpose is so important, because I know, to someone's point about we evolve, like, yes, we evolve. We're always evolving, but how fast we evolve is a different story. And what happens is, I think so much of us get stuck on a kind of a track, or like almost like a default life, right?
Right.
That that you end up, and you just kind of end up on this slow like train, and then you end up somewhere like 20 years later, and you're like, how did this happen? And
Yep.
it's because the level of intentionality or pursuit wasn't there. And so,
Mhm.
like, I like to say, like, purpose can't be done to you, right? Like, even in today's
Right.
world, like, I know a lot of people are in companies, and they, a lot of younger people too are like, oh, well, I want a sense of purpose, as if somebody's just gonna like poof, like
Right.
wave a magic wand and like just give you your
Yep.
purpose in your job. Like, you have to pursue it. You have to really, which comes with peeling back the layers of the onion in a very intentional way about, like, who are you
Definitely.
and what are your real, like, I really believe, and I know you do too, that like, it's fascinating for me to think that, like, out of like, what, we have 7 or 8 billion people on the planet now. I can't
8
keep.
billion people.
It's like
Yep.
that every person is unique,
Yes.
right? It sounds
I
cliche, but
know, it's
every
really
one of those lives has had a unique journey, has been to unique places, has had their own challenges, has
right.
their own set of like talents,
Talents,
insight,
experiences.
world. Yeah. So I feel like each person, and I think humans have this ability to dream up what's possible and do things, right, that no other species has been able to do, which is also why we can destroy more than any other species. But we have this potential,
Mhm.
and that each person has something then to give back to the world or society in some way.
Right.
There is something that lives in all of us that we can do, that is like a contribution, and it's there, right? But it's like almost like the older we get, the more layers have to get peeled back to get back to that essence. But that's where it does need to be pursued. And I know somebody mentioned about, coming out of college, and we did just speak to a bunch of college students.
Yeah, we got it too.
Yeah, I think what was so interesting is you brought
Yeah.
up, like, with them, is that, so just to, I guess, just to mention that to everybody, is that we went to a university here, in Florida, at Lynn, that has a partnership with, the Watson Institute, which is basically an organization that promotes social impact and social entrepreneurship. So this group of students were on this track to figure out what their kind of purpose is at a young age, weave it into a career of impact, or start a business, that was going to have some kind of impact. And it was fascinating, because their mindset really was very different. I mean, and this, I don't necessarily think this is the case for everybody in that generation, but this particular group of students obviously
Yeah.
were evolved, right? Like, so their answers to questions were just like mind blowing. And they totally got this concept of, like, why purpose is so important, just like at such a deep level. Um, but to their credit, they're
Mhm.
pursuing it intentionally, right?
Yeah.
Like, saying, now, the only thing that felt like I saw too, though, is almost a pressure to do so,
Mhm.
like today's society. And that could be kind of the antithesis to this journey, as if it's like you just feel like you have to do it because, like,
Figure it out.
somebody who can, be promoting this on social media, right? Like, that's
Yeah.
the right intention behind, like, the pursuit of purpose. But it was just really interesting. So I guess, like, my point is that it's not something like, yes, we evolve as people over time, but how we evolve can look very different depending on, like, what we are prioritizing, and whether or not we're trying to, like, just be intentional about this, like, one life, like, right, that you said
Yeah.
before. So that, I just think, is distinct, right?
Yeah. No, it was incredible. This was an amazing experience. I mean, I think Danielle and I were blown away, especially, I mean, by the talent, these students and the maturity level that they have. And many of them you could see their strong desire to me, so many of them were like old souls. Like, how did they know? They knew themselves so
That's
well
where we met
already.
with the future Deepak Chopra in that group, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. I truly believe there's going to be people that we're going to be getting their autographs one day, from some of these amazing students that we met. It was really incredible. But to also just see that a university had a focus on a pathway to help students figure out how they can make a bigger impact and start thinking about the role that they want to, the difference that they want to make.
Yeah.
And like you said, some of them are leading on an entrepreneur role, some of them are going to be working for organizations. But it was amazing to see these students just clear on the impact that they want to make. But it
Right.
also was
Like, at
based
least they know they
on
have that intention, right?
an
Even if they don't know
intention.
exactly what it looks like yet, right?
Yeah, and but a lot of it was events in their lives too. There was a young gentleman who the way he wants to make a difference is by helping other students get sponsored for funding to get education,
Mhm,
right? And
mhm.
he experienced that himself.
Yes.
In order for him to go to school, he had a anonymous donor who basically funded his experience to get an education. And he was, and he is completely taking advantage of that opportunity. And he wants to make a bigger impact in that way. But to your point, I have noticed in conversations, we have interns that work for our organization too. um, I am starting to feel and see that they're the younger generation, individuals that are recently graduating from college. They're not thinking about like the typical path that maybe some of us who might be in our like 40s, right? 30s, 40s, who have taken this like typical maybe corporate path. Some of them are actually saying, no, I want to start doing work. I want to know that the work I'm making or doing is going to be impactful. And
Mhm.
they're being really, thoughtful in a lot of ways about the type of organizations they want to work for. Some of them haven't figured out obviously yet what it is that they want to do. They need some help with that. But you are starting to see more people, and I think the pandemic even kind of opened that up. More people are saying, I want to live a life where I am going to have a more meaningful, fulfilling life. My career plays a big part of it. I want to know that I'm making an impact. I want to know that I'm spending time on things where, the work is important, where it's tied more to a mission or it's tied more to something, where I'm making an impact on a group or a group of individuals. And people have this desire, they want to feel that way now,
Yeah.
right? It's not just, yeah.
Well, and I feel like everybody's kind of, it's almost like, I, I feel like we've always kind of needed it. And it's like we've always,
Hmm.
um, kind of felt it. I just feel like in the times that we're living in, it's just coming up to the surface more. Like
Yep.
comment in the chat. I love the way the person said like it's the journey that quietly taps at our souls that help us align with our unique wiring. And I love the comment about the soul because you and I in our work we do kind of make that distinction between
Yes.
figuring out that next like job or the career path
Yep.
that isn't just a mental exercise, that isn't just,
Right.
you know, Nicole and I are both very like type A in a lot of ways, right? Come from the same families. We'll blame Faustina
The
and
Italians.
Mario for that. But so we have this we do put a value on like on the structure and the logical analysis, but but that should only be layered on top of like what's coming from like the soul, right? And the way that
Yeah.
I always like Deepak, I've worked with Deepak Chopra, and he used to always say that the way to think about the soul is that the soul is the ultimate choice maker. Like you could have all the stuff going on in your head like a ping pong ball, and where you're analysis paralysis and all
Mm-hmm.
this stuff, and then there's something that overrides that and makes
Yeah.
a choice at the end of the day. And so then you have to ask yourself, where does that choice actually come from? And it
Mm-hmm.
comes from, he would say consciousness, or it comes from the soul, which is basically just there is a power that regardless of whatever my thoughts are, at some point I filter those thoughts, and or like the soul, I decide which one to go with. And when we're talking about purpose, like that is like purpose can only be rooted like in that place. Now, yes, there's like a process, right, that we go through, like in terms of exercises, and there's exercises we can suggest to you guys in terms of what to then layer on top of that.
Yeah.
But we always encourage, it's like the first place to start is like asking your soul the right questions, and then making sure that the answer is coming from there, right?
Yes.
Sometimes like the right questions aren't being asked, and I'm talking about questions like, do I feel like I'm living a life that's in alignment with who I really am or
Yeah.
not? Right?
Yeah.
Like that question, that's a different question than, am I happy at my job? Like
Right.
I mean, sure, you could say you're happy at your job tomorrow. That says nothing about really what's right, right for you, right? And so it's starting with the right questions, and then when you're answering them, not having it be just like what's coming off the top of your head at that moment, depending on what you're stressed out about. It's got to come
Yeah.
from like a quiet place, from what kind of your soul is like telling you. And that's where this whole process starts. And then it can kind of get more logical, after that, right? And more like structured after that. Would you say that's like I mean, and people don't know too, like Nicole started with me because she was a client in like my program that evolved into us. So, but when
Yeah.
you went through the like process, like, would you describe it that way? Like in terms of, or how would you describe that blend, I guess, between almost like, how you figure out your purpose, what's my real question? It is like, how would you describe the process to figuring out your purpose with those two domains? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like the spiritual versus the logical. Like, how would you?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I think that one of the things that so many of us are challenged by all the time is the noise we have in our head,
Mhm,
right? I mean, like we constantly have noise in our head.
mhm.
And I think the challenges is really deciphering like what's real,
Totally.
what's not, what stories are we telling ourselves, what you know, what do other people expect of us, and we get input sometimes. Like that was challenging too, right? At the time when here I was expressing to family my frustration, for my career at the time, and everyone has advice for you, right? Like everyone has advice, and all of a sudden it's like a
Especially
ping
in our
pong.
family.
Right. And so you have to, you have to sometimes kind of be careful in terms of that. It's the same thing
Yeah,
as like when you have a child too. We all know that everyone tells you how to like take
yeah.
care of your child, right, or your baby.
Mhm.
So I think that's natural, and I think you have to find ways. And one thing that you really helped me with was just finding some ways, and I started, to meditate. I needed to start to quiet my mind a bit because my mind was causing so much chaos that I wasn't able to start truly thinking about what it was that I wanted.
Yes.
Instead, I was, again, expressing frustration and having conversations about it. Not that it was a bad thing, because I think, being open and communicating with people also opens up a lot of opportunities too, right? But at the same time, what I realized was I was just putting more noise in my head sometimes, and I had to start tapping into deeper, like, what is it, and prompting the right questions to ask of
Mhm.
yourself,
Mhm.
right? Really starting to discover more about, you asked me a question one time, like, what makes me even feel alive,
Mhm.
right? What makes me feel alive? What do people come to you for?
Mhm.
And those kind of things just allowed me to start thinking, oh my God, these are things that like make me feel alive in this moment, right?
Yeah.
It's things that I wouldn't even, you know, be necessarily like I could be being watched by many people, but it makes me feel alive. Like nothing can get in that way.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think like that was the first part, is how do I start to quiet the mind and taking some time to just again like peel back the onion.
Mhm.
Like again, I needed to understand. I knew I was very successful throughout my entire career. I knew the things that I was good at, but I didn't know exactly always how to articulate that in a way that would really allow me to stand out and be unique. Like my responses were probably more general sometimes,
Mhm.
right? Good at communication, or bring my positivity. I You helped me at least in going through some research-based assessments, and also just by understanding more of myself. And I think that's what also gave me the encouragement. It was like I was still working when I was going through this process with you,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But going through this process with you actually got me excited, because it was like I was learning more about myself and discovering more about myself, that I was starting to increase my own confidence again.
Yeah.
I started to know more of who I was, and I was able to articulate that better. And now I was getting more focused on what type of opportunities were going to be the best fit for me.
Yeah, and like, I just can I, like, highlight that a second?
Yeah.
I feel like that's the, because this isn't just about, like, oh, find it, that we just need to, like, find, like, that it's just important to figure out, like, what the purpose is. It's like what you just said, the byproduct of it is, um, yes, getting back to self.
Yep, getting back to self. Yep.
I always say there's a difference between, like kind of fake confidence. Like there's a lot
Yeah.
of people that you think are confident out there,
Right.
especially in the corporate world, and like
Yes. Yeah.
like climb the corporate ladder and have learned, with more kind of power and influence and salary and stuff, they start to look and appear more confidence. And then you look behind the curtain and there is a bit of a I hate to say hot, like a, it's like more of a shell. It's not so much of like an authentic sense of empowerment. And I think that's the ultimate byproduct of being on the path of, or the pursuit to purpose, is the fact that you really get connected to your most authentic self. And then you have a confidence that is not a fake confidence. It's like, oh, okay, I know who I am and what I contribute, and I am not, and I don't question that, because it just feels so, it just feels like so authentic. And I
Yep.
think that's like what I feel like is sad about, a lot of, in the workplace right now, is that there's a lot of people that it's almost like you get diminished. I was sitting with, well, Denise Bober will appreciate the shout out. She's the chief HR officer for the Breakers, and she's known as being somebody who's like a pioneer in workplace well-being. And we were having dinner, and we were at one of like the Breakers properties, and one of the employees like came by to say hello. And I asked him, like, what are the what and I gotta remember exactly how he responded, because I asked him, like, what has made you really stay? Because he had been at the Breakers for like 20 years working for. And I said, what's really had you like stay here? And he said something like, I've like I've never been like I've never been told to what's the word? Like it's something like diminish myself or to like
Like be
suppress
different?
in any way. No, it was like
Uh,
he basically was always like encouraged to be his whole self. He
Self.
was never expected to like diminish any part of his personality because he was like this super just like outgoing, vibrant, personality, like a little bit over the top, but like in a good way, like just such an alive person, right? And I was like, that is such a key to me is that, there's this slow diminishing of people. I think that starts to happen
Mm-hmm.
the workplace, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially over time, and the more years you're doing something where you're not really doing what you're meant to do,
Right.
like you lose this sliver of yourself, or a comment is made, or a boss treats you a certain way, or you are in a, or you don't like your work for long enough that you just you kind of start to just like lose like the essence of who you are, right? And then when you
Yep.
get that back through kind of the pursuit, all of a sudden this like energy and this new life in terms of like who you are just comes back. So I just, that goes just back to what like you were saying of like getting that sense of empowerment back. Because then when I look at like you and just know you now and what you really your gifts are now, because now I feel like I really like know that,
Yep.
almost crazy to think of you in another situation, right? Like I almost like,
And
yeah.
and someone just put it in the chat too, trying to fit the mold, right? I mean, I absolutely did that. I mean, I remember like saying yes to promotions and opportunities, and I think it's always good to take something that's challenging, but I also knew that it was going to probably take me out of more of the role where I can leverage more of my natural strengths. And you touched on something, Danielle, about when, in your career, and how people start to lose more of their selves, through this process. I think one of the things that organizations can also do a better job of is, many times I remember for so many years, you get these performance reviews with your manager,
Mhm.
right? And of course, they always highlight what you're doing well, but then they have to hone on the key areas you need to improve. So now you're focusing on more of those like weaker areas, or
Mhm.
those areas that you're not so great at. And so you almost then start to find yourself trying to improve in those areas to become to really start gaining the skills and the strengths, but it's not as natural,
Right.
right? I mean, it's not as natural. And what I realized, especially when you do start to understand your own personal strengths, I think you then can be more you can be in more of a position to share with someone, hey, this is what I'm really great at. This is my strength. If you need me to go into a meeting and network with all of the people in here, and you need me to present and put a positive spirit in that room, you've got the right person to do
Right.
this.
Right.
But if you're now looking to have me, manage all of these finances in this department and get on the phone about all these processes that need to happen in order for this, money to shift from here to there, like that was really challenging for me, like all getting into the weeds on different things. And that's where all of a sudden this frustration builds, because it's like, well, you're taking on a bigger role. You now have this responsibility, but it's taking you away from sometimes what you're really good at. But when you know what you're really good at, then you can be more active and bring that forward in discussions and say, I want to take on an opportunity where I get to do more of this.
Right.
There's other people in this organization that are much better at handling the data, the analytics, or this, this piece of the business. We should be leveraging them for that.
Right.
And that's why it's so important to
Yeah,
understand the
absolutely.
strengths of your team.
Right, totally. And to your point, the thing is that it's okay, it's not like we want to totally ignore weaknesses. It's just that the
Right.
problem, to your point, is that there's not enough emphasis first put on really valuing like
Yeah.
what you do best, right? Because, knowing you in particular, right? Like what you do best, you do like extremely well, right? So it's like every moment that you're spending outside of that zone is
Yep.
probably lost potential to the organization that you're working for, right? And
That's
it's not
right.
to say that you can be in that zone every second of your career. Like, obviously you can. There's
Hmm.
a perfect like scenario,
Right.
but it should definitely be the majority, and it should definitely be what's valued, from that employer standpoint. And the other thing about like kind of strengths versus weaknesses is that if there's anybody on the call right now who's like really feeling burnt out, one of the kind of misconceptions with burnout is that it just means that you're working too many hours. You just have an extremely high workload. But burnout is often a mental exhaustion, and the mental exhaustion results from spending time on work that you don't find fulfilling, work that is plays to your weaknesses more, where you just feel constantly not just challenged, but almost like a sense of almost feeling insufficient. Is that the right word? Like where you start to like kind of question yourself. So there's this, there's just this mental exhaustion that comes. So right. So if you're not operating in that strength zone, not
Yep.
only are you missing out on all this like potential, but it's also can be taking a huge toll on your mental and physical health because of like the burnout and the exhaustion that comes with it. So it's like, when we're talking about this kind of shift towards purpose, there's so many aspects of it that have a significant, it's like when you start to just at least move in that direction, right? Even if
That's
you don't
right.
know exactly what it looks like yet, when you start moving in the right direction towards more of this like true north in a sense, there's
Yeah.
a lot of positive things that come with that. And I think just to summarize a little bit, since I know we're talking about a lot of things that in our, like our model, like for those of you who might be trying to figure out where do you like start with this, there's kind of like these four categories where like, your sense of like purpose or that career that's in alignment can come from. The ultimate goal is to have all four of these categories kind of line up together, but let me just say them first. So first we look at your life story, your unique life experiences. The second is your passions, your like what we call them unwavering passions, the things that you've been passionate about almost like your entire life, not just like something that a hobby you took up last week that you're passionate about, but like something that's like always been with you. Your innate talents, not your skills, but your innate talents, the things that you were born with, that you've always done well ever since you were a kid. For Nicole, it's like talking to everybody at our family, gatherings and like, building relationships instantaneously, right? That is something that Nicole cannot fail at, right? So when we talk about innate talents, it's like, what can you not fail at? And then the fourth is like really like the difference that you want to make, like, and for some people, one of those categories is more apparent than others, right? So in the example you gave with the student, they found more their sense of purpose from a life experience where
Yeah.
somebody did something good for them, they want to give back. I can kind of relate to that one too, just having cancer as a kid and knowing that my life has been, all about like well-being. There's a connection with my purpose and that. For others, though, it might be rooted in something that you're passionate about, but then gets elevated to purpose, or within a talent, something that you're just really great at, right? If you're a really great public speaker, like maybe your purpose is in public speaking, right? That's like a
Hmm.
different. So it's like the kind of the clues to purpose can kind of be in any one of those four categories. Um, Me too. Someone else who talks at family gatherings. So my point is just that that's, those four categories: your life story, talent, passion, and the like difference you want to make. you can kind of start to get a sense, purpose can kind of stem from any one of those areas, but
Yeah,
then there's also almost like this epicenter where all four can come together.
that's
And
right.
I feel like that is the case, like, for me, but that's, as we're talking, we're hitting on strengths, and we're hitting on each one of these categories. And so just to give you guys a little bit more of like, what to do with this conversation, that's part of how you can look at it, is through those
Lenses.
four categories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're anything you want to add? I know we gotta like wrap up soon, and maybe we'll just finish with some more straightforward tips. But anything you wanted to kind of add to that, or should we
Yeah,
just
no, it's been an awesome conversation, right? And it's really helped me even just think about my own like personal journey, right? Even more through this process. And,
we
I
always
think
learn something new, right?
I know exactly, exactly. But I think I think one more thing is that people sometimes are, so afraid to try something different sometimes, or to make a change, or they're too afraid to explore. It's like they don't know, where it's going to lead them. And I think the thing is, sometimes we have to look at these moments of when we were uncertain at different parts in our life, right? Like when we knew we were making a decision, we were not certain about what the outcome was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we have this thought sometimes that if we try something, we're never, and if we end up not liking it, right? That that your life is going to be like over. Everything's going to be ruined. You're gonna, end up like just, end up like in a terrible place. And I think that's absolutely not the case. I had an experience too. We won't get into this one, but we'll do it on maybe another call. But, I had an experience too where I did try something pretty drastically different after the medical device industry. And I realized it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. It wasn't the right environment. It wasn't the right, like, it wasn't the right corporate or place and people that I wanted to end up working with. And but when I went into like the technology industry, that was never like asked about. It was never questioned, like
You mean the experience? You mean with like the interior design?
yeah, exactly, exactly. And so what I'm saying is that we have this thought that like sometimes we are going to try something and we're afraid of what the outcome might be. Actually, every time I have tried something new, the outcome always actually was better than, I had expected, right? There were new skills, there were new opportunities that came about. You have to sometimes just trust in your own process.
Yeah.
You have to have a good network of people that you continue, to work with and utilize. But I think again, like most people sometimes get afraid of the change, but it's just taking those steps there. It's the pursuit of taking those steps
Yeah,
there.
and you have to have the confidence too that when if it's a change that is in more that like alignment with who you are,
Yeah,
you've got to say, this is always worth it. Even if it doesn't,
exactly.
even if it's not like the success I imagine, there's going to be learnings, at least in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Like part of the fear, to your point, is like a fear of like shattering your hope, almost like that if you put
Right.
yourself on a limb or you do something different and it doesn't like work out, that it's like you're gonna almost like regret being naive enough to try something like different. I feel like there's that
Exactly.
maybe that gets
Yeah, someone just summarized it. It's okay to fail. It's where we grow. And that's
yeah,
absolutely the case for sure.
yeah.
So,
Oh,
yeah, so I know we're wrapping up here, and we do have a few things that we want to share with you. Danielle, you might be able
oh
to kind of
yes,
put it into the
totally.
chat. So, first and foremost, we have a book list that we'd love for you guys to sign up for. It's a free book list. It's a lot of the books that Danielle and I have read that really allows you to find more purpose, meaning in your careers. So definitely download that, and we'd love to hear from you. The second thing is we have a webinar coming up next week where we're actually going to talk about these 5 steps, the process that we have to building a legacy career. Okay. And so that's
Gotta
next
find that
week,
link. Hold on.
Tuesday, April 23rd. It's on our Wellbeing Hacker page. It's Tuesday, April 23rd from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time. But we'll go through more of those steps that we talked about here in how to build a legacy career. And then the third part is, we'd love to hear from you. If you guys have any questions, if you want to learn any more about our program, the way that we've gone about this process, then you could also email us at support@wellbeinghacker.com. If
Oh,
you
yeah,
want to share, go ahead.
I put the application link in too. So
Yeah, exactly. We always love to hear more about where you are in your journey, where you are in your life right now. What are some things that you're thinking about where you may be feeling that loss of meaning or purpose? And you can go ahead. Danielle also put in our links so we can hear more from you about where you are in your journey right now. So this has
and
been a lot of fun.
yeah, I know we have to sign off, but we are going to do this every month. We do just want this to be a conversation. Obviously, we're super passionate to talk about this and bring like questions or anything that we can kind of respond to in real time. We're happy to do that. But yeah, so look out for the next one if you want to join on a more regular basis. And feel free to reach out after this. But thanks for taking the time to join today in the middle of your workday. We appreciate it and hope to see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.